Alright everybody, it's time for another episode of Let's Argue, where I take on all your hot takes, unpopular opinions, and difficult questions about anime. Yeah, there's already other people doing this, but you know what? I'm better. Plus, what else do you have to watch? Cub-Like Foot says Re:Zero is the best anime to have come out in the past 5 years. What is Shirobako? Anime past 2009 is worthless. 1990 to 2009 is a catalog of anime that is all you need to get a fantastic grasp of what the medium had to offer, and anime from the 2010 onwards has been infinitely worse. I mean, once again, what is Shirobako? I would say that that's one of the best anime ever made, in my opinion. I also think a lot of my favorites come from the 2010s, in fact. Kill La Kill, Psycho Pass, Hunter x Hunter, you know, the remake. Not to mention, starting at 1990, you're missing out on the entire... You can't even watch Gundam. You can't even watch any of the original or Zeta or some of the OVAs and movies that came out before 1990, so that would be a huge fucking loss. I mean, you'd lose out on most of anime history, all the important shows that informed all the shows that came out from 1990 to 2009. And what a weird, arbitrary cutoff point as well. Like, I mean, I even remember 2010 and 2011 being good years for anime. Like, you're not gonna understand the cultural zeitgeist of anime, certainly, if you're not watching anything past that point. You're not gonna know, I mean, I guess if you're just cutting yourself off, you don't need to know about the zeitgeist, but like, why? Why would you limit yourself to just this 20-year pocket? I mean, there was good stuff then, but you're gonna run out after not too very long of shows to watch from those periods, considering that there is way more anime coming out, you know, in the current decade, and again, tons of classics you're gonna miss out on. It just seems like a really weird period of time to choose. What, are you gonna not watch Akira? No My Neighbor Totoro? You don't wanna go before 1990? Avatar is better than 95% of anime. I'm inclined to agree. I mean, Avatar The Last Airbender is a great show. I think that it has just bigger opportunity than most anime has. You don't see a lot of shows that are 60-episode epics with pretty consistently high-quality animation and that are just trying to do like a traditional hero's journey from start to finish, you know, with every single box checked off of, you know, having evolving subplots and a huge, you know, grand narrative with political ramifications and stuff going on. It's very comparable to something like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood or Eureka 7, both of which I would say are better than Avatar, but you know, that's still in the top percentile. I mean, there's so many anime coming out. I think that, you know, anything that I would give like a 9 out of 10 is obviously better than 95% of anime. And I would probably give Avatar a score like that. I have problems with Avatar, such as the fact that by being a Nickelodeon kids show, they were not really allowed to portray violence. Even there's one scene that particularly bothered me where there's like the war is going, you know, like they finally start the huge battle and they've got like this tank full of mages, if I remember correctly, like fighting all these other benders rather, and like, nobody dies. Like, visibly no one dies, because they can't just show, like, an actual war scene, and it just makes the whole thing feel kind of toothless. But, I mean, in terms of, you know, having a good story, good characters, good animation, I think it's pretty fine. Interestingly enough, there was a response to this comment where somebody was saying that he thought that the show, you know, looks great, but is ripping off Fooly Cooly for the most part. And that's true. The animation staff literally were made to watch Fooly Cooly. If you were going to work on Avatar, you had to watch Fooly Cooly first. And there are moments where it pays like direct homage to it. So, you know, obviously Avatar couldn't exist without anime, but is it one of the better anime out there? I think the argument can be made if you wanted to consider it in the running. Violet Evergarden is mediocre at best. The start of the show is far too boring. Violet has too little of a personality to make the viewer care about her. Saying a show gets better after 33% of it is done immediately disqualifies it from being good. That's the part that I was most interested in here. I agree about Violet Evergarden. I just tried to watch episode 2 to give the show a second chance. Was largely bored by it. I could see how it could potentially have some good things in it later, but I just baseline didn't care for the setting or characters at all, or like the general attitude of the story. I also don't really care for its visual presentation. I think that they went way overboard on the fucking digital effects. But yeah, I think that if we are to consider a show to be great, the whole show should be great. I can forgive having low points here and there, but like that will reflect in my overall score, because you know, a show that I consider to be perfect, a show I would give a 10 out of 10, is not going to have a bunch of weak episodes that I was bored through or that I had to really struggle to finish, you know? There are shows that, you know, might have those low points and I finish it and maybe I'll give it like a 6 out of 10 because it had enough winning qualities to make me feel as though I didn't hate the show, but you know, if the first third of a show is not really engaging, then definitely it doesn't deserve to be called a great show. Anime, manga, and light novels need an injection of fresh blood from creatives who have worked in more mediums than just those to prevent it from becoming too recursive and insular. I don't know if it needs to have creatives from other fields so much as just that the people working in it should look at more influences, should incorporate a more diverse set of influences so that they can, you know, bring things to another level. I think that too often people will look at the landscape of the thing that they're creating and try to create something that is just different enough to be unique and like, you know, not the exact same thing, but it's like 90% the exact same. Whereas if you took influences from a broader range of categories, you might create something that is nothing like anything else in your medium. And, you know, Hideaki Anno has been saying this for a very long time about anime creators, that they need to have more outside influence. And when you look into the influences of Eva, there's one video, I don't remember what it's called, I'll try to put a link in the description, that talks about Anno's influence from this like 70s Australian tokusatsu show that I had never even fucking heard of, but has like all these visual parallels in Eva that he, you know, had to have been intentional, and it just makes you think, wow, like, yeah, the reason Eva looks so different from most anime in terms of shot composition and visual direction has to do with it taking influences from foreign tokusatsu and shit, and like older media that a lot of people don't even know about who are watching Eva. So yeah, I think that's a fair point. Yeah, as the guy who responded to him, though, said, I don't think this is really a hot take. Lynx Hero 99 says, English dubs can be just as good, if not better, as the original Japanese. This is such a fucking tricky way of putting it, and there was a bunch of people saying things like this, but like, yes, a dub can be better than the Japanese if the Japanese version is bad and the English dub is good. Like, in a case like Ghost Stories, which everybody likes to bring up, the Japanese version of the show was just totally uninteresting and just some kid's show that no one cared about. They dubbed it and just made it a different show in the dub. And in a case like that, obviously it's fair to say, and I haven't even watched that show to confirm whether I think it's good, but like, I think it's fair to consider the idea that the dub could be better than the sub, you know, even though to even bring it up in the conversation is misleading, you know, because obviously the intentions are very different of the two different shows. I think that for the most part, subs are always better than dubs. And the reasons for that are multitudinous. First of all, the Japanese voice acting industry is more diverse, more respected. The people working within it are just better talents. They're people of a higher caliber than the American dubbing industry, which does not hire like the highest profile voice actors. It's not as though the people who are doing the best work in video games or doing the best work in like full-blown feature films are commonly being brought to work on anime. And it's not to say that it never happens. When you have something like Disney dubbing a Ghibli film, they will often bring in real actors, you know, A-list actors to voice in these films, and oftentimes those performances are just way better than what you would get from a typical anime dub. But because most of it is just using the same cabal of actors who all live in Austin, Texas, nearby each other, who are easy to get on board, who, you know, will do hundreds and hundreds of roles for lower rates, and honestly, it's, you know, it's not even like their fault, because the dubbing, there's just not as much money to put into dubbing as there is into, you know, voice acting in Japan, because it's just not enough of an industry in America. Like, there's no reason to pour more money and talent into anime dubbing unless you were trying to take a risk on making anime more popular and having something that hits a wider audience, and most of the time they're not going to bother doing that, again, unless it's Disney. Moreover, there's just the element of authenticity, of the fact that you are going to lose something in translation. It's always going to be a somewhat different show from the one you watched. And there are some people who just will inherently value an English dub more because it plays to their sensibilities more. If a show has a really good localization, then it might be that people who are English speakers will enjoy the show more because it resonates with them more strongly, because the jokes and the dialogue just makes more sense to them than the original Japanese. If you are somebody who has a fairly decent grasp of Japanese culture and Japanese language, then you might just find those sensibilities work for you just as well, if not better. For me personally, anytime somebody has told me that like a dub of, say, a comedy anime is better than the original, I always end up disagreeing, because I actually find Japanese comedy funny. I actually like comedy anime, and I do think that a lot of that is because of the loss in translation. And I have seen dubs where there are jokes that just don't make sense, where it seems as though there's all these non sequiturs that are just random frivolous things coming out of the characters' faces that in English mean nothing, but when you reverse engineer it and you think about what the words would be in Japanese, you realize, oh, it's a pun, or oh, it's wordplay, or it's some kind of, you know, reference that would make sense if you were Japanese and just doesn't in English. And, you know, obviously those are cases of bad localization, but I also think that localizing a joke doesn't necessarily make it funnier to me if I understand the Japanese joke anyways. So this really has less to do almost with whether or not dubs are of a high quality as it does with who's watching them. If you're somebody who can understand and relate to the Japanese dialogue and you like the Japanese performances, then even if the dub is a solid localization and does have decent actors on it, why would you choose it over the authentic version other than not having to read subtitles? Which, the more anime you've seen and the better your Japanese comprehension, that's not even really that bothersome, because chances are you just kind of glance down for a second and you can understand a lot of it anyways. You know, I can watch a lot of stuff without really reading the subtitles because Japanese dialogue tends to be pretty repetitive, and so like I've heard most of these phrases before, I can kind of get the gist of what I'm seeing. So anyway, that was like my entire dub versus sub rant really, but yes, dubs can be just as good if not better. It just almost never happens. And the only times I will go to a dub is usually if I just don't like the Japanese version. Like in the case of Dragon Ball, not just because of the fact that the voices are kind of weird, but also that the audio recording quality is really terrible for a lot of Dragon Ball, and that bothers me. But like, that is such a rare case, and it's not even that I love the English voices, I just think that it's slightly more tolerable, and I'm nostalgic for it because I grew up with it, so obviously there's even more reason for me to favor that. Alright, that's it for this episode of Let's Argue. You're gonna see this same clip at the end of every episode because I'm only recording this once before I ship it off to Devu. Follow me on Twitter if you want to, you know, be a part of the next one. That whenever it goes up, I've recorded like 6 of these in a row, so it'll be a while before I post the next tweet, but that's where you'll be able to react. And also, if you want more Digibro content, there's an endless sea of it in the every video featuring Digibro playlist, because I have a lot of channels that I appear on, and I do all kinds of shit. I'm constantly talking. I never shut my fucking mouth. My voice somehow doesn't go hoarse in spite of hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Anyway, go watch all that shit. See you next time.